Hi, I'm Teresa Bruno, and I'm here with my good friend, Natalia LePivert. And we are here today to talk about some really tough stories. Natalia has a journey that takes her through being diagnosed with a very serious disease, and then the betrayal in her marriage. I'm coming from a place of losing a beloved business and a beloved husband. They're tough topics, and we like to talk about it in the context of survival and hope, but we're just going to rip the Band-Aid off and begin. Join us. Hey, it's so nice to be here with you today.
Yes, I'm so excited to do this with you. We've been talking for a while and we're finally here and we're ready to talk about good things, bad things, challenges, and just hopefully help some people with our journey and what we've learned from it.
Absolutely. You know, I think I've thought so much about, because this is hard for me, and I didn't really want to get out in community and be vulnerable and be real and tell these stories, because we all know how difficult it can be in social media world today, and that you're going to have critics. So I certainly come to this with a little fear and trepidation. But as I've gone through my journey of about 4.5 years, the loss of a beloved business and then the loss of a beloved husband, part of what I'm motivated to do here is to provide both a generous and a gentle landing place. For us as friends and for anybody who's listening to explore the tough topics, to find a place that's gentle enough to be able to say our truths and to invite other people in to look at their lives and say, God, this was tough. This was so hard, and yet there are ways to find light on the other side.
No, I 100% agree, and I think it's so hard to, like, when you're in the moment and you're going through different challenges, to see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? And I've been going through illness and a divorce and different things in between for probably about 10 years now. So it's definitely had the moments where I've thought I've lost everything, and then just going back into rebuilding myself and relearning who I am. It has been a journey, and I'm so excited to share that and to go through this with you and just sharing with different people and hopefully helping other people to get through their challenges as we learn more about ourselves too.
I mean, absolutely. I think one of the things that's been one of the biggest challenges that I still work on all the time, and certainly one of the biggest challenges for me just after I had two fairly big life situations happen, is that we run away, I ran away from human connection and community, and yet I know in retrospect that connecting to others, being able to get outside of oneself, is one of the ways, it's the paths out of healing. I mean, the paths out of shame. It's the paths toward healing, to be able to begin to open up just a little bit. And so what you're saying, is certainly relevant, that anytime you can share your pain. I think you've taught me a really interesting phrase that I love, and I've clung to, so I'm going to steal it. You said to me once, you said, every time you share your pain, the pain has less power.
Yes, I do believe that, because I think when you share, it helps, someone else is now helping you carry that burden. Now it's not just yours to carry. I've done the same as you. I went pretty much hiding, ran away, did all that, like literally ran away, left everything behind. But I think when you're able to get to a point where you can share your pain with other people, now you realize, one, it's not just you, right? We've lived completely different lives, and still have so much in common. And it took us to share to be able to realize that. If we had never had that conversation, we would have never known how much in common we actually have. And sharing it lessens your pain, but it makes you not judge yourself so much as you would if you didn't, because now you realize people are struggling everywhere with different things, and we're all just trying to make it somehow.
I completely agree, and it doesn't matter what my pain is or your pain is or what life has brought to you in your journey, everybody's pain's 100% is what I feel. But I'd love right now to make a little pivot and ask you if you'd kind of be specific about your journey.
Yeah. So for me, I think what was really like a pivotal change for me as a person was when I was about 29, I got really sick. And it took about a year and a half for me to actually get a diagnosis. But I have lupus, which is an autoimmune disease. And the first 3 months I was sick, I was just like kind of expecting that at some point I'm gonna go to the doctor. They're gonna give me, they're gonna do a blood test and they're gonna give me an answer. They're gonna give me a prescription and everything's gonna be solved and I'm gonna go back to my normal life, right? It did not go like that. So I'm sitting in the couch and I'm miserable and I'm just eating my days away. And I remember I got out of the shower one day and I looked at myself in the mirror and I just didn't recognize myself.
Do you mean you didn't recognize yourself in the way that you looked, or you didn't recognize the way you were, your spirit?
It was more of like a deeper thing, like physically, it's not like I had gained weight or anything, like nothing had changed physically. It was more like I didn't like recognize, like it was like a soul thing, like you're looking at yourself and you don't recognize who you are. Because I was just like so dull and lifeless because I was just so caught up in being sick. It became who I was. Like and at that moment I was like, whatever this is, because I didn't have an answer. So I had a lot of fears, like, am I gonna die? Is this gonna be something serious? Like, what is this gonna be like? And at that moment, I was like, I don't want this to define who I am. Whatever this is, I don't want this to define who I am.
I think that's remarkable that you could already, just a few months into a really difficult place in your life, say, I don't want this to define me. Because what you said earlier, when you first looked in the mirror and said, I don't see me in here,
Yeah.
You were becoming what you had been
Yeah.
told. You were becoming the person who was sick.
Yeah.
And yet you made a nice turn.
And I think it's easy to allow the situation, yourself to become the situation you're in,
You're absolutely
versus
right.
like, hey, remind yourself of who you are. But I think I didn't realize who I was at that time. So it was like really like a moment where I had to change everything. So if I was miserable and I was in pain all the time and I had all these strange things happening and my body was just completely out of control and I never knew what the next hour was going to be like, how I was going to feel the next hour. So I decided that moment, I was like, I'm going to make the best of it. If I get up and I'm going to go to the grocery store, I'm not going to go rolling like I just roll out of bed, because that's what I was doing. I'm going to dress up. I'm going to do my best to look like good. Like I actually put in an effort to get out of the house, and I would do my hair, do my makeup, and I didn't have a lot of energy at the time, so like that would be my energy for the day. But I wanted to look at myself and not feel like that again.
You know what I hear in the very beginnings of your story? Brene Brown, who's written so much about shame in our culture in the last few years, you know, she's studied shame for, I think, 2 decades. And in my mind, she's decodified it in our culture so that we're not ashamed any longer to admit that we have shame. But what you were doing, because she says, you know, there are 3 things that keep you, you know, when you've gone through a tough situation, when you feel like you're in absolute survival mode, the thing that keeps you from walking into any path out or walking into healing, it's secrecy, it's silence, and it's judgment.
Yep.
And for you to be willing to get up and get dressed, if you had to go to the grocery store, making an effort, you know, you were already creating a path toward walking out of it.
Somehow I was conscious that if I kept going that path, I was going to end up depressed, or I was going to end up with who knows what. And I don't have an answer, so I had to advocate for myself. I had to go to the doctor, and I had to like push for answers, and like not just accept the first prescription they were going to give it to me. And I had to I went to 10 different doctors in the span of a year, and I went to Brazil. I was doing at one point, I had blood work done every day.
Oh my gosh.
And I had my my skin hurt, my veins hurt, because like I had all these symptoms. They're so strange, and I just couldn't take blood anymore. There was nowhere to take it anymore at one point, and it was painful. But like I could either become a victim of that situation and just be like, okay, this is how it is. I'm gonna sit home, because I had doctors tell me that that's what I should do. I should not exercise. I should sit at home, and I should just. That was gonna be my life for however long, and I was like, I just turned 30. I'm like, I can't. So I kept, trying to figure out, and then I went to started exercising and dieting, which is something I never done before. So I had to change everything, and then I went from like not doing anything and sitting on the couch and being sick to now I'm like prepping to compete in a bodybuilding show.
Oh, wow.
I actually
That's
got
a big swing.
Yes.
How long did that take to go from not exercising to competing?
It
with your
went
body?
a year and a half. I actually got diagnosed the week of my first competition. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So it took a year and a half, and I don't like competing, but I did it. And it was a challenge because I didn't like being on stage. I didn't like doing any of that, but I was like, I'm gonna do it. I had to figure out, and I learned how to manage my lupus after all these years. And I'm in a place where I don't take medication now. I'm very blessed with that, but like it took a lot.
And then, as I know your story a bit,
Yes.
you had this disease and you were grappling with it and trying to figure it out. And
And then I had I was married at the time, and I found out my ex-husband cheated, and that destroyed me. That completely took like the ground out of my feet.
I know that feeling.
It was a lot. Like everything I knew was gone. I just didn't know. I didn't have family around. At the time I wasn't working because I was sick. So I'm trying to figure out all these things, and the one person you think you would count on, and all these things, and it's like suddenly completely gone. And that was, but things are funny because I do think God is going to give you what you need without you realizing it. So if I had not got sick, I would have not have this and learned this instinct of like, I gotta stay healthy and I gotta stay sane. So throughout all the craziness of finding out all these different things and going through a divorce and moving out and selling house, moving to a different state, I had one thing in my mind. It's like, no matter what, I'm going to continue to stay healthy, and I'm going to figure out how to stay sane through all this craziness.
I think it's, again, I can't find another word right now, extraordinary maybe, that, you had such a sense about you. You already could say, I don't want this to devour me. I don't want this to destroy me. Yeah. I didn't have that. It all came caving down, on me. I did in the very beginning have some very courageous acts.
So let's take a step back. What are we talking about here?
Well, there is that. So it was probably about 4.5 years ago. I had a little business that was a passion business, a jewelry design business, and it was a second business for me. And I had just put everything I had into it. And I had to close that business. I lost that business due to fraud. And it was heartbreaking to me. And I felt like such a failure because I didn't see what was happening in that business. I felt like a failure because I'd let down the clients who trusted me to be their designer. I felt like I had really let down all the stores who had believed in me and put my product in there. And, oh gosh, it just really did something to me.
And failure can be so damaging.
Yeah, and I had come from an experience of having a very successful business, which I still had. This was a second business and a passion business. So just as I was literally packing up that business and closing it down, my beloved husband of 29 years took his life.
Wow.
And when you say you felt like everything you ever knew went away. It was like the ground disappeared. I had no idea how to begin to hold on to anything or, put anything back together again. And I think there was so much fear and there was so much shame. And I hate that there's shame out of such a tragic situation. I was coming, I carried the shame from the failure of the business. I was already pretty down.
He was already in that spot of shame.
Then for something like that to happen that I just never saw coming. After a few courageous acts in the very beginning, I really folded in on myself. I sat still and quiet and in secrecy and in shame for about 2 years. I went to work, I did the things that I absolutely had to do. And I had this feeling that if I could, I had 2 boys and they were both in their 20s and was so worried about them. Every act that I did was about how can I keep these young men going? They loved their dad so much.
You have to keep it together for them.
How could this have happened to our family? And so I think I got in this really very destructive pattern of, I'm not going to let anybody know how I feel. I'm going to get up every day and do what I have to do to keep now our family of 3 together. I'm going to look okay. I'm going to go to work and run this other business, and I'm going to go back home and collapse on the sofa.
See, but when you say this, you were doing the same as I was doing in your own way. Because at the end of the day, life, you could be going through the easiest or the hardest situation. Life doesn't stop.
And that is the most true statement. It doesn't
matter stop.
What you're going through.
It doesn't.
You still have to pay the bills. You still have to.
It doesn't matter how you feel, how you don't feel, what you have in your mind or not. You still gotta get up and show up. It doesn't stop. So you were doing the same thing in your own way. And I think, because I was also hiding the same way you were doing, but you hiding behind closed doors, right?
Yeah. I've told you the stories of the first, gosh, I don't know how long it lasted, a long time for me. And it's so illogical to me as the woman that I thought I grew myself up to be, kind of in charge, lived life big. I thought, that there was not much I couldn't do. And I became so small after my husband's death. Something happens to you in this kind of deep tragedy. I would drive around Birmingham, Alabama, where I lived at the time. I would need groceries, okay? I would need gas. And I could not, I don't know how many Publix grocery stores I sat in the parking lots of because I just didn't have, I was afraid to see other people. I felt so much judgment, that they would think, what's wrong with your life? How could that have happened? Did you not know? Could you not have helped him? Those were the thoughts that were running in my mind, so I assumed others were
I've done the same thing. I used to sit in the car for an hour, and I'm like, I'm not even getting out. I used to go grocery shop in a different town so I wouldn't see people.
And it's helpful for me to hear that because I thought I was the only freak in the world who drove around to every grocery store because I was afraid to go in.
But that's the thing, in the moment you think it's just yourself, so the judgment is really coming from us. The judgment is not coming from other people. The judgment is in your mind. You judging yourself, so now you think everybody else is doing it.
I think that's absolutely true. But let me just go back on my little story. I did always get gas. I never ran out, but I pushed it.
Very good. 6 miles left.
That's right. Okay, I have to get out of the car.
Yeah.
I didn't do this well. I actually did this very poorly. But I think always the way to any kind of recovery, even in the smallest of ways, is somebody on the other side. I learned when I would get out of the car and when I would go in somewhere, it was the people who could really look me in the eye, who could say, I get it, me too. I understand how you'd be feeling. And I think it's so, so important that we cling to our families and our communities and whomever it is that you can lean into when you've gone through something. that's really tough, because that's sort of your way out. It's
Yeah.
human connection for me every single time.
I think it's because those people are going to keep you grounded of who you are and not let you, even if you don't see it in the moment, they won't let you sink, because that's what you want to do. But like in my situation, I didn't really have a lot of people, because a lot of the friends we had at the time, when I got sick, people thought I was crazy, because on the outside you couldn't see it. So people thought I was making it up. So like, oh, you just don't want to like do this, you're boring, you don't drink anymore, you don't want to go out. Like, I don't have the energy to do any of this. So I actually lost a lot of friends when I got sick.
Well, and also part of your story is you came to America from Brazil,
Yeah.
intending to stay, what, 8 months?
Yep.
And then here we are, and we are so glad you're
We're
still here
15 and
years
counting,
later.
15 years and counting. You
But
know?
you didn't have a big support system
No,
at that time.
I didn't have a lot of people that I knew. So I'm judging myself and thinking I am the failure. I'm the one that's the damaged goods. I am the one that's like,
Don't we always do that?
Oh, I'm
We
like,
find our unworthiness
yeah.
in almost everything that happens to us, and then we have to figure out how to turn it around.
No.
It reminds me, when I was talking about human connection, leaning into it, and me having a really tough time getting outside of myself, there were people, though, who did such beautiful and extraordinary things for me early on. And I'll never forget them. Like, my life has changed. I have a good friend, and we were good friends before James died, but since then we've really, really bonded in that in 3.5 years, it's been a little over 3.5 years since he died, not one single day has my friend Marie Wright skipped a day, no matter what was going on in the world, no matter where I was. Even if one of her daughters was having a baby, I got a text every day that said, hey, I'm here, how you doing? And sometimes I get really ticked off at her text, because I'd be like, don't ask me how I'm doing. I don't want to talk about how I'm doing, because
you're not
inside
doing well,
I was
yeah.
falling apart.
Yeah.
But the consistency, of that was, it began to create a little ground, underneath my feet. I also, I have this sister who's, I would say probably one of the most generous listeners, because I didn't get better fast. It was like people would talk to me on the
takes
phone,
time.
and it would be like, same story, repeat. Same story, repeat. Because I
Because you were
had
stuck
a
in the
really
same
hard
spot,
time,
yeah.
asking all the questions, all the whys. How could this happen to us? Why? And staying in that pain. But my sister would listen over and over and over. And one of the most powerful prayer warriors ever is, and I could feel her, I could feel in her listening that she was somehow carrying me.
Yeah.
And go
I
ahead.
think it's like in that point you don't realize how much you need somebody to do that. And you said a word earlier, you said consistency. You need consistency of some,
Constancy and consistency.
you need something that's positive, because you, like, in that moment you can't really see it. So you need that from someone else.
Absolutely.
And you might not be able to see in the moment, but like when you look back, you can recognize it. Like, I had, similar to you, I had this one friend of mine that she's a few years younger than me, and she got married really young, and her and her husband just kind of like in a way took me over, where like they were like, no, we got you. And to this day, he would be like, she would say that I need to move back to New York just to be closer to them, because he doesn't like that I'm here by myself. And they were such like strong like believers and like prayer people that, like, even though I was not Christian at the time, I knew they were caring for me in that way.
I think listening is so important. There's this poet, theologian, monk, philosopher. He died just a couple of years ago. His name's Thich Nhat Hanh from Vietnam, and he wrote a lot about what he coined as deep listening. And he says, when you can really get in front of somebody like your friend, like my sister, and you really get still within yourself, and you can deeply listen to that person, that you are showing the greatest compassion to just deeply and tenderly listen. And he has the coolest story he tells about the village that he kind of formed in France, because it's called Plum Village, which I'm totally in love with the name Plum Village. I mean, it's so beautiful. But he said once a week, every single person in that village comes together and they get quiet, and one-on-one they just listen to another. So they have this community practice of deep listening. Those are part of the things that were so helpful to me in those early days, were people who listened even though I was on repeat. Will you tell that? Because it's so fascinating to me that you could do that.
After I got a divorce, I packed everything from Connecticut and I moved to Texas, which I didn't know anybody. I moved to Austin. I lived there for a year, and it just didn't feel right. So I decided I'm just going to get rid of everything I have. I'm going to have a suitcase, and I'm going to, I had this illusion that was going to be this very glamorous, and it was going to be like, everything you see on social media, and I was going to go overseas. So I spent almost a year overseas, and I went from Europe to Asia, and I was pretty much by myself the whole time. My friend Natalia, she came to see me twice in different countries, but besides that, I was by myself. So I spent a lot of time alone, and I would go days without saying a word, which is very unusual for me, because I can talk. But I learned to just listen, and
you were listening to yourself.
I was listening to myself, which was really good. But I started to realize people around me and things and places, because I would sit. I used to love, when I was in Rome, I used to love to just sit in front of the Colosseum. They have that little, square over there, and I used to just sit and I watch the tourists, and you have the military people, and you're just kind of watching the chaos. And it kind of we have so much chaos within ourselves.
Absolutely.
Right? So but it's just when you're sitting there and you're seeing the Colosseum's beautiful, and you're seeing all the chaos going on. So there's always this contrast of beauty and chaos. And our lives are so much of that. There's so much beauty and chaos at the same time. So
beauty and pain.
So it really taught me to learn how to look for beauty in pain.
That's beautiful.
And if I didn't go through all this stuff, I would not be here right now. And I would have not learned so much about me and been able to be better with the people around me, and to those that have hurt me and to those that have not, that I've hurt, right? And take responsibility for my own actions and the things I've done. And so listening comes in so many different forms.
That's true. That is so true.
Yes, I can sit and listen to you saying something, but am I really listening to hearing what you're saying and understanding from your perspective, but not mine? Because I can't just take your story and twist it to me, because that's yours. So I have to understand and I have to respect it for who you are and what you went through. I might not agree with it, or I might answer it in a different way. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It's what you needed it. So it gave me a lot more empathy, and it made me a lot more calm, and I can deal with conflict a lot better than I used to. So I had so many fears, and one of them, it was that going through the divorce, my fear is that I was going to become a bitter person. I don't know why I associated that in my mind. I have no idea why, but that's what I associated with. And I was I do not want to become a person that's bitter.
So when you are walking through Europe, basically, and I tease you and say, you're trying to do the Elizabeth Gilbert, eat, pray, love.
I only did the eat and pray.
You left that love part out?
I left that part out.
No, you did self-love.
Well, that is true, but yeah.
You were taking care of
But I didn't mostly eat and pray.
I think that's a great journey. I think it's a journey we probably all would love to take, and
I know, it was
have
really
the
good,
freedom
yeah.
to do.
It was scary though. It was
I
scary
can't
because
imagine.
I was, you like anything else you do in your life, you think you have this idea of how it's going to go, right? And it most of the time doesn't go how you plan in your head. And I remember my first week in Italy, I was all it did was rain, and everything went wrong. I got locked out of the Airbnb I was in. It was like a whole thing. And I was like, what did I do? Because I just got rid of everything I have. And it's so easy to want to give up.
Oh my gosh.
Having to be in this position where I didn't have a choice, it was where it took me to really figure out who I was.
That's a remarkable journey. All
Thank you.
kinds of things to explore in that.
I know, but it comes with a lot of shame. It comes with a lot of fear, and we're going to be talking about that in other episodes. But it does come with so much beauty.
I can see that now, but I sure did not see it in the first bits that I was in my journey. So Natalia, our journey continues, right? Thank you so much for being with us today. This was a really exciting day for us to begin this journey, this new journey for us with the Soul Talks podcast. And as I said earlier today, it's scary to be so vulnerable and to tell these parts of our past that have led us to do this show. And I hope you'll join us next week. We will continue to share some of the toughest parts of our survival journeys, but every time we do an episode, we want to leave you with some tools and we want to leave you with hope.